For nearly a decade of service, patrolling the silent expanses of Texas highways had become routine. However, the night of August 9th, 2013, just past 1 a.m., brought a call that stood out from the usual. The radio reported a truck blocking part of US 277, approximately 4 miles south of the small town of Bronte. The dispatcher clarified that a passerby had reported the obstruction, followed by a 911 call. The caller identified himself as Brandon Lawson, 26, and urgently pleaded for help. His words were fragmented but chilling. Someone was chasing him. Despite distortion and static, the voice on the line sounded extremely agitated and urgent. As the closest patrol to the scene, the officer immediately activated his emergency lights and headed to the specified location. Highway 277, especially at night, is an extremely isolated stretch of road. The landscape is monotonous, flat fields covered in thorny mesquite, and the rare silhouettes of rabbits crossing the road. The moon that night was bright enough to cast long shadows, but this only intensified the feeling of eerie silence. Over the years, the officer had seen many vehicle breakdowns in these parts, from running out of gas and flat tires to drivers simply losing their way. Yet, there was something profoundly unsettling about this particular call. Arriving at the scene around 1:10 a.m. confirmed the dispatcher's information. Indeed, a silver Ford F-150 was there. It was parked extremely carelessly, partly on the shoulder and partly occupying a lane of traffic. The hazard lights were not on, and the driver was nowhere to be seen. The officer cautiously approached from behind, and the powerful spotlight of his patrol car cut through the pitch darkness. The truck's windows were down, and there were no keys in the ignition. There were also no signs of an accident or struggle, just an empty, abandoned vehicle. The officer radioed in the license plates and confirmed that the vehicle was registered to Brandon Mason Lawson, residing in San Angelo. Stepping out of the car, the officer felt the gravel crunch under his boots. The air was heavy, still retaining the heat of the day, and the chirping of crickets was so deafening it seemed to drown out his own thoughts. The officer carefully scanned the area with his flashlight. The beam picked out patches of tall grass and thorny bushes stretching along the road, but nothing more. No tracks, no broken branches, nothing that could provide any clue as to where this person had disappeared. A loud shout, "Brandon Lawson, Sheriff's Department," echoed through the area, then faded into absolute silence. There was no response. The officer thoroughly inspected the truck. The fuel level was at 0, which matched Brandon's words in the 911 call. A pack of cigarettes lay on the passenger seat, several empty, Doctor. Pepper cans were on the floor, and a phone charger dangled from the dashboard. Ordinary items, not immediately suspicious. The officer speculated that Brandon might have walked towards Bronte or hitched a ride. However, the words from the 911 call continued to trouble him. "I'm in the middle of a field. A guy is chasing me through the woods. Please hurry." The operator who took the call confirmed that the caller's voice sounded panicked, but the connection dropped before she could get more information. There were no woods in this area, only sparse trees and brush. What on earth was he running from? Around this time, another vehicle pulled up to the scene, a pickup truck with a gas can in its bed. It was Kyle Lawson, Brandon's brother, accompanied by his girlfriend. Kyle looked extremely worried. He explained that Brandon had called him around 2:30 a.m., saying he had run out of gas. Kyle decided to bring fuel and help his brother. The officer asked if Brandon had said anything else, perhaps about trouble or someone chasing him. Kyle shook his head, responding that Brandon just sounded irritated about the truck breaking down. The officer asked them to stay put while he searched the surroundings. He walked approximately 100 yards in both directions, illuminating the ditches and adjacent fields with his flashlight. Nothing, no bloodstains, no torn clothing, no signs of a struggle. If someone was chasing him, as he claimed, where did they disappear? There were no other vehicles in the area, and the nearest residence was several miles away. The officer called for backup, and soon another couple of sheriff's deputies joined them to assist in the search. They combed the fields until about 3 a.m., but Brandon had seemingly vanished. By dawn, the Texas Rangers were called in. Later that day, they deployed a helicopter that searched the area for many miles around. The results remained the same. Nothing. Soon after, Brandon's girlfriend, Ledesha, arrived in a state of extreme panic. She explained that they had argued that night, and Brandon had left to cool off, planning to go to his father's in Crowley, a 3-hour drive away. She also mentioned that Brandon had been clean from drugs for a long time, but there was an old arrest warrant for him, years old, related to a minor drug possession charge. This made the officer wonder if he had fled to avoid law enforcement. But then why call 911 if he intended to disappear? The 911 call recording was truly chilling. The officer listened to it at the station. Brandon's voice was fast, breathless, as if he was running. "There's one car here. I ran into him. A guy is chasing me." The operator tried to calm him, asking if he needed an ambulance, but he kept repeating that he needed the police. Then there was static, and the call disconnected. Law enforcement obtained his phone records. The last signal was detected near the truck, after which there was complete silence. His phone was either dead or turned off. Days seamlessly turned into weeks. Searches resumed with K9 units, volunteers, and even drones. The Rangers took over the case, classifying it as a cold case, an unsolved disappearance. Many theories circulated. Did he get lost in the brush and die of hypothermia? Did he stumble into something like a bad drug deal and get murdered? Or did he simply run away, abandoning his 4 children? None of these hypotheses formed a coherent picture. A father of 4 doesn't just vanish, not without a trace. Years passed, and then in 2022, a search expedition discovered clothing that appeared to belong to Brandon. A yellow shirt, camouflage shorts, white Nike sneakers. These items were found along with bones and a skull fragment. The DNA testing process was long and painstaking, but by 2024, it was definitively confirmed that the remains belonged to him. However, the cause of his death remained undetermined. The absence of bullet or stab wounds only deepened the mystery. How could his remains end up in the middle of the wilderness, just a few miles from his own truck? Even now, driving on Highway 277, the narrator experiences a strange sense of unease. What did Brandon see that fateful night? Who was chasing him? Or was he overcome by such intense fear, such madness, that he himself plunged into the impenetrable darkness and never returned? In his years of work, the narrator has seen many things, but Brandon Lawson's story remains with him, like a persistent echo. It feels as if the highway swallowed him whole, leaving behind only a multitude of unanswered questions. The narrator remembers working as a night guard at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. The pay was modest, but it was the only way to support his family. His wife stayed home, caring for their young son, while he spent long nights patrolling the cold, deserted aisles filled with stored goods. One night, his life irrevocably changed. He had just started his shift, and the clock showed around midnight. The warehouse was silent, broken only by the hum of the lights and the rare echo of his footsteps. He usually brought a thermos of tea and his old, barely functioning mobile phone. His son should have been sleeping peacefully at home, but around 1 a.m. his phone vibrated with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar. Usually the narrator never answered such calls, but that night, for some reason, he picked up. A gruff voice said, "We have your child." At first, he thought it was someone's sick joke. His boy should have been safe, at home. But then he caught a faint cry in the background. It was his son's voice, the narrator's stomach clenched with terror. The man demanded money, a colossal sum of $10,000, which he could never have raised. He was a poor man working as a guard for meager wages. He said he didn't have that kind of money. The man just laughed and stated that he had until the next evening. Then the connection broke. That night, the narrator left the warehouse, trembling with fear, and rushed home. His wife was in a panic. Their boy was gone. His son's bed was empty, and the back door was wide open. They immediately contacted the police. The narrator told them everything, including the call. The police advised them to remain calm and assured them they would set a trap for the kidnappers. The narrator couldn't sleep and couldn't eat. All he did was wait for the phone to ring again. The next day, the kidnappers called back. They named a meeting place, an abandoned parking lot by the river. The police devised a plan. They would hide in unmarked cars, watching every corner, while the narrator would bring a bag that looked full of money. They promised to catch the kidnappers before anything happened. That night, he drove to the parking lot with the fake money. The place was dark, surrounded by broken streetlights and weeds pushing through cracks in the asphalt. The river made a faint noise in the distance. His hands were sweaty on the steering wheel, and he constantly looked at the passenger seat where the bag lay. The police contacted him through a small earpiece. They told him to stay calm, just follow instructions. He got out of the car and stood under one of the few working lights. The air was cold, and he could hear every beat of his heart. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. Then, without headlights, a car pulled up. It slowed and stopped about 20 feet from him. His throat was dry. A man in a dark hoodie and mask emerged. He stared at the narrator, then at the bag in his hand. For a second, the narrator thought it would work. The man walked slowly but steadily towards him. Then, suddenly, he froze. His head turned slightly, as if he saw something. The narrator realized what it was. He had spotted one of the officers hiding at the edge of the parking lot. The man rushed back to his car. The doors slammed shut, and the engine roared. They sped away so fast that gravel flew into the air. Police cars chased after them, lights flashing, but the kidnappers knew the area better. The narrator stood there helplessly, clutching the useless bag. The chase ended in failure. The officers lost them somewhere in the labyrinth of old roads by the river. When they returned, all he could do was collapse onto his car, feeling that he had lost everything. That was the last time he had hope. The next morning, a package appeared on his doorstep. He knew what it was before he even opened it. Inside was the body of his child. His world crumbled. He felt dead inside. His wife screamed until she lost her voice. He couldn't even explain the pain. It was like something had torn open his chest and left it empty. He couldn't protect him. He couldn't save him. After that, the police worked day and night. It took weeks, but they finally caught those people. There were 3 of them. All had prior convictions, robberies, assaults, and worse. They confessed after hours of interrogation. They had been watching the narrator for weeks, knowing he was poor and thinking he would do anything to get his child back. Now they are in prison. The law says justice has been served. But for the narrator and his wife, nothing feels like justice. They no longer have their boy. The man's heart still drops every time the phone rings during his new night shift. Though he now works elsewhere. Passing dark corners, he invariably sees his face, hears his voice calling his name. That fateful night at the warehouse, which seemed like an ordinary shift, ended up costing him everything he held dear. No matter how many years pass, the silence of those endless warehouse spaces continues to remind him of the stillness that has settled in his own home. The tragedy occurred in May 2025. This isn't a story where fear creeps up suddenly, but it is certainly the most terrible experience of his life. The man and his friend, Brandon, both in their early 30s and from Atlanta, eagerly anticipated a 10-day trip to Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida, to escape the routine of their office weekdays. They had been looking forward to this journey for months, discussing future rides on the Velocicoaster, exploring the magical world of Harry Potter, and many other attractions. They booked a room at the Hard Rock Hotel, located right by the parks, with 2 queen beds and a magnificent view of the lagoon. Brandon asked if his girlfriend Michelle could come with them. They had met on Tinder a few months prior, and he was completely smitten with her. The man agreed without hesitation, believing it would be a fun addition to their company. At the airport, Michelle made a pleasant impression. She was about 25 years old, had brown hair, a wide smile, and was wearing a Gryffindor t-shirt. They hugged, chatted a bit about the upcoming flight, and headed to the hotel. At that point, there were no red flags, but the situation began to change rapidly. By the first day, Michelle had completely taken the lead. She insistently demanded they skip the parks to visit random restaurants she found online, whether it was some Cuban place downtown or a vegan cafe miles away. If the friends wanted to go on a ride, she would pout or cleverly change the subject. Brandon always gave in to her, and the man agreed to keep the peace. It was certainly annoying, but he attributed it to her personality quirks. Soon Michelle started talking non-stop. She endlessly chatted about her job, her ex-lovers, or strange theories, such as Disney secretly running Universal. She seemed unstoppable. Brandon suggested it might be ADHD, or perhaps she had forgotten to take her medication. At night, the man couldn't sleep either. She would talk through the bathroom door while brushing her teeth, or whisper to Brandon at 2 a.m. The man would hide his head under his pillow, but her voice drilled through it. Brandon also looked exhausted, but he just shushed her and rolled over. The worst part was that Michelle stayed in their room. Brandon asked if he minded, as she couldn't afford a separate room. The man said it was fine, thinking he was being a good friend. This was a huge mistake. The room became cramped. Her belongings were everywhere, chargers, makeup, snacks, all over the beds. There was no privacy, no quiet. By the 3rd day, the man was at his breaking point. That day, they finally managed to visit the parks. They rode the Hulk coaster, enjoyed butterbeer, and laughed in the Simpsons area. It felt like the trip they had originally planned. Afterward, the man grabbed a burger at City Walk, Antojitos, cheap and tasty. Around 8 p.m., he keycarded into their room. He is 14 now, but this happened when he was 11. His older sister was suffering from a severe toothache again. She never really brushed her teeth, and such nights were not uncommon in their house. It was bitterly cold outside, one of those nights when the air burned your nose and the windows were covered with a thin layer of frost. Mom stood in his doorway, half dressed in her coat, and asked if he wanted to go with them to the dentist. The boy replied that he preferred to stay home. He hated the cold and liked the thought of a warm blanket and a movie. She said they would grab food on the way back. It sounded perfect. They left, and a heavy silence settled in the apartment. The kind that comes after a door closes and the building seems to settle. 2 minutes later, his phone lit up, showing a call from an unknown number. He never answered such calls, so he just watched it ring until it stopped. The phone rang again. He ignored it again. The boy convinced himself it was probably a wrong number. Some delivery person trying to reach someone else, or a scammer. The second call died down, and he tried to forget about it. His nose was running, and he sneezed 3 times in a row. He made himself a cozy nest on his bed, blanket up to his chin, pillow neatly stacked. He called his friends, and they played games on their phones for a while. After that, he put on a movie and let the sound fill the room. The kind of sound that makes you feel safe, as if you're not alone. And then he heard it, breathing, not his own. A slow, steady sound behind him, as if someone was trying to breathe quietly, but too close to the wall. His stomach dropped. He paused the movie. The room became quiet. He could still hear it. He didn't look back. He just slid off his bed and crawled into his sister's bed across the room. He kept telling himself it was the heating, or the ventilation, or a pipe in the wall, old building, old noises. He stared at the doorway leading to the hallway, listening, but the sound never quite faded into the building's general hum. 20 minutes passed, and then the lights suddenly went out. When one speaks of fear of the dark, it means something more than just the absence of light. It's the feeling when anxiety constricts your chest. It seemed as if the very space of the room had shrunk, pressing down on his rib cage. He pulled the blanket over his head, trying to slow his breathing. He knew that their apartment sometimes had power outages, especially on cold nights when everyone turned on their electric heaters. He convinced himself that the lights would surely come back on. He commanded himself to remain still. He decided to count to 100 and then try to activate the flashlight on his mobile device. Around the count of 60, his resolve wavered slightly. He abruptly threw off the blanket and grabbed his phone. The battery was only at 10%. His attempt to turn on the flashlight was unsuccessful, as the phone was in power-saving mode and would not allow that function to be activated. He desperately tapped the screen, as if these actions could change anything. No light, just a dim lock screen reflecting his own face. Enos. At that moment, the bathroom door stirred. It didn't slam shut, but slowly closed, the latch making a barely audible click. The bathroom door was light, and sometimes a draft from open windows could push it, but this time all the windows were tightly closed. The person was acutely aware of this. Their gaze was fixed on the dark silhouette of the doorway, and a flush of heat spread across their face. The person didn't want to speak, but finally uttered, "Mom." In response, there was only silence, broken only by the creaking of the building, a common occurrence in cold weather. The person sat perfectly still, hearing their own heartbeat in their ears. Thoughts turned to Mom's car pulling onto the street. The smell of takeout food came to mind. The person imagined the bright lights of the dentist's office and their sister's complaints. The mental replay of mundane things continued to ward off the rising fear. The electricity returned with a soft pop, and the lights flickered. The heating fan started, the refrigerator hummed, and the apartment was once again filled with the sounds of life. The person exhaled, not realizing until that moment that they had been holding their breath. The person convinced themselves that the sound of breathing was the heating system. The person explained to themselves that the bathroom door's movement was due to an air pressure change caused by the power outage. They almost managed to believe it. Then the phone vibrated, the same unknown number again. It filled the entire screen so casually and indifferently, as if it didn't know that for the past half hour, its existence had consumed all thoughts. The person stared at it, not answering. They watched it ring until it stopped. Then, a call was made to Mom. The person tried not to sound scared, but their voice still trembled. They said that something had been heard, that the lights had gone out, that someone kept calling. Mom replied that they were paying the bill and heading home immediately. 10 minutes, she said. Every second of those 10 minutes stretched like an entire minute. The person got up and, on shaky legs, crossed the room to the bathroom. The door was closed. Placing a hand on the handle, they stood there, almost touching the wood with their forehead, listening. Nothing. Quickly opening it, they found the bathroom empty, towels neatly in place, shower curtains still. Nothing moved. The person returned to the bedroom and tried to laugh at themselves. They turned the movie back on, making the sound too loud. When Mom and sister returned home, the person almost ran to the door. Cold air rushed in with them, and the apartment smelled of the street, the dentist's office, and food. Mom touched their face and asked if everything was okay. The person replied that everything was fine. Everyone ate and behaved as usual, and the person convinced themselves that the night was over, but it wasn't. The next morning, the sister's phone rang as she was brushing her hair. An unknown number. She said hello as she always answered calls. There was a pause. Then she frowned and hung up. Strange, she murmured, adding that no one was there. The person advised her not to answer if it called again, and told her that the number had called them last night too. The sister grimaced and suggested, maybe it's the dentist. However, the dentist's number was saved in Mom's phone. That night, as everyone was getting ready for bed, Mom's phone rang. An unknown number. She looked at the person, and everything inside froze. She didn't answer. It rang and rang, then stopped. A minute later, it rang again. She ignored it. After it quieted, she tried to call back. The call didn't go through. She tried again. Nothing. She blocked it. 2 days later, it called again. This time during the day when everyone was home. It called once. Hung up. Called the sister's phone. Hung up. And then called the person's phone. The same pattern, as if it was moving through their house from phone to phone. The person answered, heart pounding, planning to say, "Stop calling." The phone was pressed their ear. Breathing was heard, slow, heavy breathing. No words, no background noise, just that calm rhythm, like someone who had all the time in the world. The person listened for a second longer than they should have, then hung up. Their hands trembled so much that the phone fell onto the carpet. Mom grabbed her keys and said they were going to the police station. A report was filed. The officer was kind. He asked if the caller had said any words. He inquired about the times of the calls. He asked if anyone knew who had gotten their numbers. He told them that unknown numbers could be spoofed or hidden, and sometimes it was difficult to trace if the caller was using certain apps. He advised them to block it, keep a log and call if the situation escalated. He didn't say it would stop. The silence was supposed to come. The calls, however, didn't stop for a whole week, continuing to ring at the most unpredictable moments. They invaded the peace of deep night, woke us at dawn, interrupted daytime meals. Sometimes there was absolute silence on the line, just the echo of an unseen presence. Other times only someone's breathing was heard, light and barely perceptible. Once, we clearly distinguished a faint cough, as if someone was trying to muffle the sound by covering the microphone. To avoid looking at the screen every time, we changed the ringtones, assigning this number a unique signal that immediately betrayed its ominous origin. We spent nights with the hallway light on, creating an illusion of safety. I moved my bed closer to the door, as if that could protect me from the invisible threat. Mom kept her keys and phone on her nightstand, ready for immediate action. Even my sister, who usually needed constant reminders, started brushing her teeth without prompting, as if she believed routine could ward off the approaching darkness. And then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The calls ceased. A day passed, then two, then a whole week. Life, as if slowly awakening from a nightmare, gradually returned to its usual rhythm, leaving behind only a vague memory of the fear experienced. The sight instantly paralyzed me. The room was completely ransacked. A lamp lay broken, its shards scattered across the floor. My laptop, an $800 MacBook holding invaluable work photos, was savagely pried open on the bed, its screen shattered. A Gringotts goblin souvenir, meant for my niece, was crushed. Clothes from my suitcase were torn, stained with wine, and some items were cut with scissors. The mini fridge stood open, its contents spilled onto the floor. Drawers were emptied, their contents strewn about. It resembled a robbery, but far more brutal and senseless. The damage amounted to hundreds of dollars. "What happened here?" I exclaimed, my voice trembling with shock. Brandon sat on the bed, pale with shaking hands. Michelle, however, sat on the floor, calmly picking at her nails as if nothing had happened. "It's not my fault," she said without looking up. "This is your room. You paid for it, so you deal with it." At that moment, I completely lost my composure. All her demands, her endless talking, and now this. "You two need your own room," I roared, unable to contain my anger. "This is insane. My things are ruined, and I've had enough." Brandon tried to say something, but Michelle slowly stood up. Her eyes were cold, completely empty. She reached into her jeans and pulled out a knife. It wasn't a folding knife, but a large one, like from a kitchen set, with a black handle wrapped in electrical tape. My heart stopped. Where could she even get that in a theme park? The thought flashed through my mind. "You can't kick me out," she said in a low voice, approaching me. "After everything." She lunged forward, swinging the knife at my face. I felt the blade whiz inches from my cheek. Pure instinct kicked in instantly. I dodged, tripped over the doorframe, and slammed the door right in front of her. The door hit her in the chest, knocking her down. The knife clattered to the floor. She cursed, reaching for it, but I had already darted out of the room and was running without looking back. I flew down the stairs to the lobby. The front desk clerk, Raj, stood behind the counter. "Call the police!" I gasped, spilling out the whole story, the knife, the trashed room, her attack. He immediately pressed the panic button. Security arrived very quickly, and then, in less than 10 minutes, the Orange County Sheriff's Office appeared. They arrested Michelle, handcuffing her while she screamed that I had ruined her life. Brandon was distraught, apologizing and offering his credit card to cover the damages. The hotel compensated my stay and moved me to a new room. That night, I locked the door tightly, flinching at every sound. Michelle was charged with assault with a deadly weapon. However, here's the catch. She was released 2 days later. Some judge let her out on $5,000 bail for reasons I will never understand. I cut my trip short, flew home to Atlanta, and blocked Brandon for a while. I needed my space. Then the situation worsened. Brandon called me a few days later from a blocked number, his voice trembling. Michelle had come for him too. The same knife, the same crazy look in his apartment parking lot in Tampa. She cut his arm, requiring 6 stitches, but he managed to fight her off and called the police. The charge is mounted: attempted murder, violation of a restraining order. She is now in jail, awaiting trial. The worst part is that Brandon isn't going to leave her. He claims he's afraid she'll come after him, or his family if he does. She's not always like this, he keeps repeating, as if that changes anything. I called him a coward and cut off all contact with him permanently. He is now my ex-friend. This trip was supposed to be filled with roller coasters and magic wands. Instead, it showed me how quickly things can go wrong. 1 minute you're laughing about butter beer, the next you're dodging a knife in a hotel room. If you meet someone online, do a deep dive into who they are, because some people hide monsters within them. And I learned that the hard way. I still double-check my locks at night. I never imagined grief could drive a person so deep into the woods. However, after my mother's passing, it was vital for me to get away. My name is Forrest. I am 32, and I work as a mechanic in a small town in upstate New York. My mom was only 58. She always had a smile despite her heart problems. She swallowed beta blockers like candy to keep her blood pressure in check. But one night, she took too many. At least that's what the coroner said. An accidental overdose. However, immediately after the funeral, rumors began to circulate. My stepfather, Rick, had been arguing with her more frequently lately. The bruises on her arms, which she meticulously hid under long sleeves, bothered me. Some diner patrons swore he'd slipped extra pills into her tea, envious of her small inheritance. Others said it was just her forgetfulness, a disease affecting her mind. The police classified it as an accident. No charges were filed. Rick got the house, and I got a crushing sense of guilt for not noticing it all sooner. I couldn't sleep in my apartment anymore, staring at the ceiling, replaying the arguments I'd heard. So I packed my old Ford pickup with a tent, a sleeping bag, a cooler with sandwiches and non-alcoholic drinks, and headed for the Catskill Mountains. He headed for the Catskill Mountains. The drive there took about 3 hours, winding through pine groves, where the air was infused with the sense of damp earth and untamed freedom. He chose a secluded spot, far from busy routes, the Black Bear campsite, but ventured deep into the woods, avoiding the proximity of families with their RVs and children's chatter. It was just him, the flickering campfire, and the silent stars. In his mind, he held out hope that 3 nights spent in complete solitude would help clear the fog that enveloped his mind. There was no cell service there, and that was the whole point of his trip. He arrived late on a Friday evening in October. The leaves had already turned yellow, crunching under his boots with every step. Quickly setting up camp, he pitched his tent by a creek that gurgled as if whispering ancient secrets. The campfire flared to life from dry branches and a lighter pulled from his pocket. After cooking a hamburger, he opened a can of Bud Light and sat watching the sun slowly dip below the horizon. The air quickly grew cold, a piercing chill that seeped into his bones, raising goosebumps on his skin. At that moment, he remembered his mother's laugh, her playful scolding about him never settling down. Then Rick's voice echoed in his mind, shouting about money a week before her death. "She doesn't need that old fool," Rick would have said. He brushed away these thoughts, convincing himself that this trip was for her, for both of them. Night fell, a heavy, inky black blanket. There was no moon visible that night, only the campfire's light casting strange, flickering shadows on the tree trunks. Around 10 p.m. he crawled into his sleeping bag, but sleep never came. The creek's whisper began to sound ominous, like distant, arguing voices. The wind rustled through the branches, making them creak like old floorboards underfoot. He lay with wide-open eyes, his heart pounding from the excess caffeine from his last soda. That's when he heard it, a soft crunch, like a branch breaking under someone's foot about 20 yards away. A deer, he thought, as there were many here. But then another crunch, closer this time. He sat up, flashlight in hand, aiming the beam into the pitch blackness. Nothing but tree trunks and swaying ferns. He tried to laugh off the fear, rolled over, closed his eyes. A few minutes later, another rustle, clearer this time, as if something was deliberately pushing aside fallen leaves. His pulse quickened. He grabbed the flashlight again and turned it on. The beam of light cut through the darkness, falling on a mighty oak about 15 feet from his tent. And there, peeking from behind the trunk, were eyes. 2 crimson points, glowing like embers in a dying fire. These were not animal eyes, too high, too still. They stared directly at him, unblinking through the mesh window of the tent. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. "Who's there?" His voice came out softly, swallowed by the forest's depth. There was no answer, only those eyes continued to hold him in their steady gaze. Then, slowly, like an embodiment of sin, a hand rose from the shadows, pale with thin, crooked fingers that seemed to beckon. "Come here," it silently said. "Join me." The air around him grew thick. Cold sweat beaded on his neck. His mind frantically searched for an explanation. A bear. No, bears' eyes don't glow red. A poacher. But that hand, it was unnatural. Too long, joints bending wrong, like bones under loose skin. He shot up, heart hammering like a jackhammer, zipped up the tent flap, fumbled for his boots. Those eyes didn't move, just watched patiently. The hand waved again, gently, as if calling a lost child home. His mother's face flashed in his mind, her pale cheeks in the coffin, Rick smirking at the wake. Was it him waiting for him here? No, that was crazy. But the eyes burned brighter, drawing him in, causing a pulling sensation in his stomach, like a hunger that couldn't be ignored. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing his keys, he burst out of the tent into the cold night. Branches slapped his face as he ran, the flashlight beam bouncing erratically. The creek splashed under his boots, mud sucking at his heels. Behind him, a low chuckle, or was it the wind? He didn't look back. The ranger station was a mile down the trail marked on his map. His legs burned, his lungs burned. He pushed through thorns that tore at his jeans. Every shadow hid those eyes. Every tree hid that hand. "Help!" he yelled, but only an echo answered. Finally, the station lights appeared. Yellow bulbs on the log cabin glowed like a beacon from hell. He pounded on the door at 1 a.m., gasping for breath. Ranger Neil, a stout man in his 50s with a broom-like mustache, answered, awakened. "Bear get into your camp," he grumbled, but he spilled everything. The eyes, the hand, his dead mom, the doubts. Neil radioed another ranger, poured him coffee that tasted like tar. Probably a hiker with a red LED, headlamp playing a trick, he said, but his eyes said he wasn't sure. They waited until dawn, him shivering under a wool blanket. The sun rose, gray and weak, through the clouds. They walked back, him, Neil, and his buddy Tom. A shotgun slung over Tom's shoulder just in case. The trail seemed shorter in daylight, but his stomach churned with anxiety. They reached his spot. The tent sagged, the fire pit cold ashes, no tracks but his own, and a deer's print in the mud. No eyes, no hands. Neil walked around, found his hamburger wrapper fluttering in the wind. "See anything?" Tom asked. He shook his head, examining the oak. Only bark and moss. They decided he had scared himself. Grief plays tricks. "It happens out here," Neil said, patting his shoulder. "Go home, son. Get some rest." He packed up quickly, hands trembling as he folded his sleeping bag, drove away, radio blaring classic rock to drown out the silence. Back home, he slept for 2 days, dreaming of red lights and beckoning fingers. Several months later, Rick sold his house and moved to Florida. The police officially closed the case, classifying it as an accident. However, last week, late in the evening, as he was alone fixing a carburetor in his workshop, under the hum of fluorescent lights, he saw them again. In the rearview mirror of a client's crookedly parked Chevy, 2 red eyes flickered in the dark yard, and a hand slowly rose from the shadows, beckoning him. The man rushed inside and locked the door, immediately calling the police. The arriving officers found nothing, just an empty yard where the wind rattled the chain-link fence. But he was sure it was there, waiting for answers, or perhaps wanting him to join her. Whatever caused her death, it now craves company, and it definitely knows where he lives. It was September 7th, a young woman's 24th birthday, and she dreamed of something modest. She didn't want a noisy club or an overcrowded bar. Time twos. Her only wish was to have a quiet, secluded celebration in a place where she could fully relax with her closest friends. Online, she found a beautiful Airbnb house. It was a 2-story building located on the outskirts of the city, with a spacious backyard, perfect for hanging fairy lights, setting up a fire pit, and creating a cozy gathering area. She booked this house for the weekend. Moreover, she even paid extra for catering services to completely free herself from the hassle of preparing food and drinks. The catering company promised to send 3 waiters to serve appetizers and beverages. Her plan was a barbecue dinner accompanied by music, laughter, and a complete absence of any dramatic events. The weather promised to be warm, slightly humid, but perfectly suitable for an evening outdoors. On Friday afternoon, she arrived at the venue with her best friend, Harper. Her friend helped her unload boxes of party decorations. The house looked even better in person than in the photos. Its facades were painted white, a wraparound porch encircled the building, and a tall fence securely enclosed the yard. Inside, the owner had left the Wi-Fi code and a spare key hidden under the doormat. Harper and the birthday girl spent several hours setting up folding tables, stringing lights in the trees, and blowing up balloons. By Saturday morning, the place was fully ready for a real celebration. By 6:00 p.m., the catering staff arrived as promised. There were 2 men and 1 woman, all dressed in black vests and ties, carrying trays and ice buckets, exuding professionalism. One of the men was tall with a short haircut. The other had disheveled brown hair and a name tag that read Alex. The woman's name was Lisa. They offered polite smiles and immediately got to work. Guests began to gather around 7:00 p.m. The birthday girl's brother, Marcus, was the first to arrive, bringing a pack of non-alcoholic drinks. Then came Harper's friends from work, a few old college neighbors, and a couple of neighbors. Soon the grill was in full swing. Steaks sizzled on the grates. Corn wrapped in foil was ready to be served, and music streamed from a portable speaker. People laughed, enjoyed their drinks, and shared stories. The backyard glowed with string lights, and fireflies danced in the grass. The servers discreetly blended into the background. Tom, the tall waiter, constantly refilled drinks without being intrusive. Alex remained by the food table, ensuring trays were always full. Lisa cleared dirty plates. Everything ran smoothly, as if they had done it hundreds of times before. By 10 o'clock, it was cake time. The birthday girl had ordered a large vanilla cake from a local bakery, covered in white frosting and adorned with the inscription, 24 and thriving. Everyone gathered around the picnic table. Marcus lit the sparklers. All the guests sang in unison, and the birthday girl blew out the candles in one breath, wishing for a promotion at work. People clapped and eagerly dug into their slices. It was at this moment that she noticed Alex. He wasn't holding a tray. Instead, she saw him by the chair where the gifts were stacked. He unzipped her new leather purse and extracted a small item. Then he reached for a box that held a silver necklace. "Hey man, what are you doing?" her cousin Jake loudly exclaimed, catching him red-handed. Everyone turned to look. Alex froze, his hand halfway to the box. His face remained impassive, showing neither guilt nor fear. "What?" he uttered in a lifeless voice. "You're stealing," Jake said, moving closer. "Put it back." Silence fell over the yard. People stopped eating, their eyes fixed on Alex. Then Alex reached into his vest pocket. He pulled out a switchblade and flicked it open, the blade glinting under the string lights. Gasps filled the air. Harper grabbed the birthday girl's hand. "Back off," Alex said, calmly pointing the knife at Jake. "Nobody move. Call the police, and you'll regret it." He slowly retreated toward the gate. Chairs scraped across the ground as he slipped into the dark side yard. Chaos ensued. Marcus yelled for everyone to stick together. Harper called 911 and reported what had happened. People whispered, fearing he might return. Jake checked the gifts. Some money and a charger were missing, but the necklace was still there. 10 minutes later, 2 police cars arrived. Officers took statements under the light of the porch lantern. The birthday girl told them about the catering company she had booked. Quick Serve Events. They verified the name and took notes. Another officer searched the yard with a flashlight, but Alex was long gone. They advised them to lock up and stay inside. The party had to end early. People left in groups. The birthday girl stayed with Harper in the house, too nervous to sleep. Every creak in the old house made her jump. Ring. Around 2 in the morning, the phone suddenly vibrated, breaking the silence. Police officers seemed to have returned to the front door. "We found him," one of them said, his words echoing in the air. The officers escorted everyone to a downstairs bathroom. The narrator's heart sank, sensing something was terribly wrong. Inside, leaning against the cold wall, was a semi-conscious man in a waiter's vest. His shirt was torn, his skin unnaturally pale, and his chin was stained with vomit. Needles and a syringe kit lay on the countertop, indicating recent medical procedures. Paramedics were already assisting him. In a weak voice, the man mumbled, "They claimed to be guests. 2 men. They offered me a drink before my shift. My throat burned terribly. I woke up here with no clothes, no knife. They said they would handle the party themselves." The officers exchanged significant glances. One of them reported that the contents of the syringe tested positive for powerful sedatives. The bitter truth hit everyone with incredible force. The man in the bathroom was the real Alex, the genuine waiter. The 2 individuals previously thought to be Tom and Alex were merely imposters. They had cunningly drugged the true employee, taken his uniform, and infiltrated the party unnoticed. Lisa, however, was indeed who she claimed to be. She had genuinely left the event early due to a headache. But these 2 men skillfully played their roles throughout the night. They deftly poured drinks and served food, all the while harboring a sinister plan for robbery. By dawn, everyone had packed up and left the Airbnb. The owner promised a refund for the rental, but peaceful sleep never returned with the same ease. The narrator's thoughts constantly drifted back to the knife, to how calmly and coolly it had been aimed at Jake. The police classified the incident as attempted robbery, but to the narrator, it felt far more sinister and ominous. A month had passed since that day. She was still 24, but birthdays now felt tainted, overshadowed. She couldn't stop replaying the events of that night in her mind, reliving each moment. In her imagination, images of those men arose, smiling as they served food, subtly observing everyone present, and sometimes a disturbing question surfaced. Was stealing money truly their only objective? Or were they plotting something far worse, something that never came to pass because Jake spoke up in time? At one point, the narrator worked at a Pizza Hut, located in one of Tucson's less affluent neighborhoods. This area was notoriously known for its dilapidated apartment buildings, numerous trailer parks, and duplexes that seemed long past their prime. Most customers were typically not generous tippers, and many appeared to be struggling with drug addiction or living on government assistance. This job was certainly neither the safest nor the most pleasant, but it allowed her to make ends meet and pay her bills. One evening, an order came in for a large meat lover's pizza with extra sausage. The delivery was assigned to another driver. However, even before that driver could return to the store, the customer was already calling the pizzeria, claiming the pizza was so spicy it was inedible and demanding an immediate replacement. The staff doubted the truth of his claim regarding the dish's spiciness, but the manager decided to send another pizza to resolve the conflict and appease the dissatisfied customer. When the driver returned, he was given a fresh pizza for redelivery. Everyone believed this would finally solve the problem. However, their hopes were dashed. The man called again, not once, but twice more over the next few hours. Each time he repeated the same complaint. The pizza was too spicy and he couldn't eat it. The staff continued to send replacements and retrieve the old pizzas, ostensibly for quality checks, though in reality, they simply threw them into the dumpster. The pizzeria believed the customer was trying to scam them for free food and hoped he would eventually stop calling. By 11,000 callers p.m., an hour before closing, he called once more, demanding another pizza. By this point, the manager's patience had worn thin. He politely but firmly explained that they could do no more. If the man came to the store the next day, he would receive a refund. Everyone assumed the incident would be over. The narrator wasn't closing the store that night, so she was at the register, counting the day's earnings. Just then, a beat-up truck screeched to a halt in the parking lot, stopping right at the front door. A heavy, unkempt man emerged from the cab, carrying a pizza box. He came inside, placed the box on the counter, and declared he was there for a refund. The narrator called for the manager. While waiting for the manager to arrive, the narrator watched as the man opened the box and began to mumble. "This pizza is so spicy," he said. "You just have to try it. Someone's putting pepper in the sauce or something." The narrator, trying to avoid conflict, told him she believed him and stepped aside. The manager approached to process the refund, but the man became even more agitated. He pushed the pizza toward the manager, insistently repeating, "You have to try this. You just have to believe me." He poked his finger into the pizza, turning it into a shapeless mess. The manager calmly explained that he didn't need to try it and asked the man to leave the premises. Finally, the man took his pizza and quickly rushed back to his truck. By this time, all the store employees had gathered near the entrance, the waitress, the cook, and other drivers. One of these drivers was the person the narrator had a secret crush on. When the man drove away, the narrator tried to lighten the tense atmosphere with a joke. "Hey, Kevin, want to try my pizza?" Everyone laughed, but the laughter didn't last long. The truck suddenly screeched to a halt, then accelerated back into the parking lot. The man burst inside again, this time enraged. He yelled at Kevin, "You think this is funny? You're laughing at me!" Kevin froze as if struck by lightning. The man climbed onto the counter, shouting that he would teach him a lesson. He demanded that Kevin come outside to fight him. Kevin was only 22, slender, and clearly frightened. This man was much older, larger, and far more unpredictable. The manager managed to calm him enough to push him outside and quickly lock the door. For a moment, it seemed that it was all over. Then a rumble sounded, and the massive truck reappeared, but this time its maneuvers around the building took on a sinister tone. A gun now protruded menacingly from the driver's window, pointed directly at them. Instantly, everyone present dropped to the floor, gripped by panic. The waitress couldn't hold back her sobs, and their manager, trembling all over, blindly fumbled for the phone to dial 911. Each time anyone dared to raise their head for a quick glance, they saw the truck continuing its terrifying circular drive. Eventually, the vehicle stopped and parked neatly next to a driver's car, seemingly waiting, clearly hoping that one of the employees would come out for a delivery. They remained hidden, barely moving, until, after approximately 15 minutes, their pursuer finally drove away. The police arrived almost an hour after the incident. By that time, one of the employees had already hastily left the scene, consumed by fear that the aggressor might return if he stayed. The next day, the man continued to call the establishment. He furiously yelled into the phone, claiming that they had attacked him and even thrown pepper in his eyes. Fortunately, because they had his phone number and address recorded, law enforcement was able to promptly track down the assailant. The police arrested him, and he was never seen again after that. Following this incident, his name was permanently placed on the Do Not Deliver blacklist.